My name is Joyce Peachey and I live in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And instead of doing Orienting with the Word in congregations, in a congregation, I worked with children at an elementary school. I used to be a teacher at Eastern Mennonite Elementary School, and some of my former colleagues are still there. And so I presented this idea. I had heard about Orienting with the Word, and I said, Melinda, hey, could I do this with children? And she said, sure, because it's Melinda, right? And so I am just going to tell you a little bit about my experience and three things that I learned. We would begin each time, it was groups of 15 children, 15 to 20 children, in a circle, and I would start out with a low bar question like, tell me something you had for breakfast, or what is something that you hope for? And we would go around the circle. People could pass if they wanted. Often this got old, but they wanted to pass so that we would come back around again, and then they could then they could talk. But which took a long time with 15 children. But beforehand, I had always chosen a different child to be the person who would ring the singing bowl, and I would sort of say, "Now I'll tell you when you need to ring that," and that was, of course, the coveted position to do. And they would always ask me when I came in, "Can I ring the singing bowl?" And so they were a part of the circle, and different children would take turns doing that. And what I loved about circle process, which they were used to and they know about it, they had experienced it before, but in what I felt, it was kind of new for me, is that it gave every voice was welcomed, and it gave a chance for everyone to be heard and noticed. Even if they passed, we stopped and acknowledged them. And I saw as we went on how important that was, because children who didn't speak at first, by the fifth or sixth time, were starting to share even just a couple words. So that is the first thing I experienced and appreciated about doing Orienting with the Word. I also heard children identifying with the stories, and here's two examples. I don't remember which psalm. I want to say 104, but that could be wrong. I was reading something about welcoming the stranger, or welcoming a foreigner. And then I sort of stopped. This was third grade, and I said, "Do you know what that word means?" And a couple of them said no. And so then I described what a foreigner is: someone who has lived somewhere else and is now living in the country, and in our country or a different place. So they've come from another country. And this third grade boy said, "Oh, like my dad." And I went, yes, because yeah, he found himself in the story, or his family in the story. And then the other thing we did was, in second grade, we acted out the story of the anointing, not nearly with all the details. And Samuel, there was a Sam in our class, and so Samuel wanted to be Samuel. Oh my, and that was great fun. But when we went around 3 or 4 weeks later to, what is something you remember about doing these Bible studies? And everyone said, when Samuel was Samuel. So that was very important. So in this process, I heard children identify with the stories that we read. And the third thing that I appreciated about it is that it helped children imagine and explore who God is in a safe environment. When we started the very first session, I let them ask questions. First, we went around and said, just say what you know about the Bible, or something you know about the Bible. Some children, it's a Mennonite school, but there are many children who do not attend church or maybe come from another faith. So there were a variety of responses. And then I said, if you have a question about the Bible. And so third grade had a wonderful array of questions, including, are Santa and the Easter Bunny in the Bible? So I said, let me get back with you on that. And I don't recall exactly how I answered that question. But I mean, the child was dead serious. And I thought, well, what a great question. We talk about those things at those times of year, and they're all kind of mixed together, especially if you don't go to church. So I thought it was great that he could ask that question in that setting. And my favorite story, and I've said it, sorry if you've heard this before, but in kindergarten, I mean, as you can imagine, kindergarten, I wasn't sure if this was going to be appropriate for their level. And we had talked about the kings and sort of went on I did my own variation of the theme that everyone else did. So I started in the Old Testament and stayed there, and then talked about earthly kings, and then got to the New Testament. We started talking about Jesus and parables and what is God's kingdom like. And in kindergarten, I think I phrased the question, and I sort of was doing a teacher thing, which was trying to get them to say, you know, a particular answer, sort of not on purpose, but I found myself reflecting on that later. But I think we read the parable of the mustard seed, perhaps, and what do you think might be growing in God's kingdom? So, child one, maybe vegetables, maybe. So we were getting concrete things. And then dear Gianluca said, poison ivy. I think poison ivy might grow. And then, of course, going around the circle, everyone else wanted to do poison ivy. So then I rephrased the question and said, well, what might God, besides, I don't remember what I said, something about what might be growing inside of you? What might God want to grow inside of you? And, you know, then they gave the right answers. Love and joy and hope and peace. So I was processing this with Naomi afterwards. Where is she? I don't know where she is. There she is. And she asked me this wonderful question. We had someone who talked with us, and Naomi was the person who talked with me periodically. Like, well, you know what? Maybe there is poison ivy in God's garden. And so I started thinking about, okay, in God's kingdom, what might poison ivy be? And maybe that wasn't a dumb answer. Maybe that really is something to ponder and think about. And so there are days when I ponder, is there poison ivy growing in God's kingdom? And what am I going to do about it? So.